Bevor es mit der folgenden Podcast-Episode losgeht, noch ein ganz kurzer Hinweis in eigener Sache. Du fotografierst gerne Street, aber deine Bilder erzählen keine Geschichte? In meinem Online-Kompaktkurs Street Photography geht es genau darum. Weg vom schönen Einzelbild, das von der Ästhetik lebt, hin zu Bildern mit Bedeutung und erzählerischer Tiefe. Der Kurs besteht aus 4 interaktiven Live-Seminaren mit Raum für deine Fragen, für Austausch und Diskussionen. Plus einer abschließenden Bildbesprechung mit ausführlichem Feedback zu deinen eigenen Bildern. Los geht es am 4. Februar 2026. Alle Infos findest du unter www.abenteuer-reportagefotografie.de/street-photography-Kompaktkurs. Den klickbaren Link findest du natürlich auch nochmal wie immer in den Shownotes in deiner Podcast-App. Ja, und wenn du Fragen dazu hast, dann kannst du mir auch direkt eine E-Mail schreiben an Kai Beermann, alles klein und zusammen, Beermann mit BEH, @web.de. So, und jetzt geht es los mit der Podcast-Episode. Viel Spaß!
It really feels like sometimes the job is literally just getting there to stand in that position in that moment. It's that simple. Yeah, you press the button. I mean, we have cameras now that are so sophisticated, autofocus and whatever, all that stuff, you know. I think taking a good photograph or a visually interesting photograph is become so easy in some ways. But the challenge that I'm always focusing on is the storytelling. That's the hard part.
Well, let's get started, Matt. Thank you very much for taking the time.
No, it's a pleasure. Good to be here.
Yeah. And welcome, Pia. Nice to have you alongside as well again.
Well, I'm very happy to share this moment here together. Thank you, Matt.
No worries.
We're quite far into the artist walk here in Baden. Quite intense. Lots of exhibitions. And we've seen lots of images. And now maybe you hear it. We have some ambient noise. The birds are singing. A quiet moment here with you, Matt.
It's a beautiful summer's day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sitting on a bench and looking at your exhibition. Your pictures are here displayed on large panels in the park in Baden. Matt, you were just taking a very close look at your images as I observed you a little bit. What were you looking at there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a real thrill to see these pictures printed at this size. We so often, as you know, my role as a photojournalist, we're thinking about the smaller formats. Whether that's like a newspaper or even just online. These days, so much of our images are consumed on phones. And so actually I'm getting off topic here, but that's really had an impact on the way that people photograph. People really fill the frame. It's about making, images that are quite tight and close. And sometimes I've got to try to remember to actually pull back a bit and not be thinking always trying to fill this frame and make these kind of close images. And so just that's a long way of saying to see them now in this massive format here outside, it's a totally different experience to see these images in that way. And even looking at them now on the panels, I'm seeing details in the images that I've never even noticed or recognized before. Because when I'm working on my images, I'm using like a laptop and I'm not really going deep into look at details. I'm just sort of looking at it in a global sense, and I like to make changes globally and not really go in too deep and too tight. And yeah, so it's really nice to see them at this scale. Yeah, in this kind of in beautiful environment as well. Yeah.
Before we get to the series you're displaying here, it's about the bushfires. Let's talk a little bit about how you got into photography. What was it that first got you into photography and fascinated you about picking up a camera and use it as a tool to tell stories?
Well, I think first off it was like just an interest in photography more than the storytelling aspect. I was fascinated by making beautiful pictures and the way that pictures would come together, like from a composition point of view and colors. And I was from a very young age, I was into visual arts. So I used to paint, and so it really for me started off as an interest in photography, and then it sort of became more and more a focus into storytelling, and to the point now where I would say I'm much more interested in storytelling, and the photography is almost like secondary. So a lot of my work is like very research based, which is this is very different because this is a news photography, so it's very different to this. I'm going out to research a story, and then I'll make contacts, try to organize access, and then pitch the story to an editor, and then so there's a whole process behind the photographs. It's not just going out and just wandering around to take beautiful or interesting photographs, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
May I ask you what difference do you see between photojournalism and storytelling?
I mean, I think photojournalism is just like my interpretation of photojournalism, which might not be everyone's, is I don't think it's press photography. I don't think it's news photography. I really think that photojournalism is storytelling with images. So I think they're the same for me. So it's about like really understanding the story you're talking about, you're picturing, and to be able to make a meaningful image and series of images. I think photojournalism is about working in series and multiple images, and how that comes together. To tell like a larger story. That's what I would say. I mean, storytelling, I guess, is the broad term for that photojournalism would fit under. And I think there's other ways of doing, of working with the camera and making beautiful stories. That can be a bit more conceptual and more, I guess, more subtle or different, I guess. And I also love working in that way when I have the opportunity. But when I work for newspapers, it's a very, I feel like there's a very specific way where the expectations are of that we make a particular kind of image, and we're working in a particular way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Do you have a formal education in photography, or how did you develop your skills as a photographer?
Yeah, so I studied visual arts at university, and I found that too conceptual, and then I went to a technical college and studied photography, and I found that too technical. And so then so the only real sort of solid like education I've had in photojournalism was actually I studied at the Danish School of Journalism for 6 months as a sort of what do you call it, like a short diploma, and because I was hungry to learn, and I didn't have there was not much in Australia. There was not many options to try to to find this kind of education, and there's a because there's no real industry there. There's not much of a tradition, I guess. And a lot of the best photojournalists from Australia are working overseas. Not to say there's not great photographers in Australia as well, but there's just not that sort of the population to sustain an education in this. It's I guess a better way to explain it was that my way of getting into photojournalism was very different than most Australians. Most Australian photographers are going through like a newspaper as a cadet, and then they learn through working and being around experienced photographers. And so for me, I didn't have any of that kind of guidance. And so, I was really hungry to learn, and that's why I traveled to Denmark. Yeah.
We did an interview, I think, a while ago with Søren Pakta. Is he still?
Yeah, Søren. Yeah. Søren's great.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he was one of my, Mads was the main teacher for the international students, but Søren was the head teacher there. He's great.
Yeah, he's great. We had a great talk. And what is it that you took away from this more formal education of photojournalism? You mentioned like there's different paths leading into photojournalism. Some you learn it on the job, and you took another avenue.
Yeah. So honestly, at the time, I feel like I hadn't matured as much as to the photographer I am today, and so I was sort of it sounds contradictory, but I was like, I was obsessed with like the single image, and I used to worship photographers like Alex Webb, and Alex Webb was the main influence for me, and of course there's others, and people like Trent Park from Australia, and these photographers that are working in the single images, and compositionally complex, beautiful colors, and so that I was really fascinated and focusing on that kind of work. And so, looking back, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that I think a lot of the education, what was on offer there, kind of went over my head. I wasn't ready for it at the time. It really came so slowly to me, like and so after that education, I went out and made spent years photographing on personal projects around Australia. But I was still really working in single images. I hadn't really thought about storytelling in the way that I do now, and that came much later. Primarily because probably the biggest influence on me has been my wife, and she's a journalist. Actually, she works for Der Spiegel. So you'd be familiar with Der Spiegel in Germany. So just being around her and talking about stories, it sort of opened my eyes up to how to think about storytelling and using images to in that sense. So yeah, particularly we can get into that a little bit later, but like a big part of what I do in Australia is that we are so remote, we're so far away from the rest of the world, and we don't have these big stories, like we don't have this like political turmoil. We don't have. So it's a quiet news location, right? So to survive there, I've really had to like figure out like how to pitch stories from this place that are going to be of interest to like international media, because these are the companies that have the funds to pay for stories now. Australian media is never going to pay for a freelance to go out 4 or 5 days out and photograph. It's like the New York Times, it's National Geographic. These are kind of leading Stern magazine or something like this. So I had to learn how to tell stories with cameras and figure out what these editors were interested in. What they wanted from Australia. So that was a slow and painful journey, but I feel like now I'm at a point where I can do that quite well, and I kind of know, oh, this is a story that is going to work, and
How would you describe the way of telling a story with several images, or this process of moving away from the single image to tell stories with more images? Can you describe it a little bit more in detail?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is like instinctual, and you're just for me, like I don't get too stressed while working about, oh, is this the next image? I got to get another. I'm not really thinking about that. I think some of the best photography or the best mindset to be photographing stories is to be just open to what comes before you, and if you spend a few days and you're only seeing a small amount of things, and that's just the way it is. We're documenting what happens. We're not trying to like make things happen. You can only photograph what's in front of you. And so when I'm photographing, I try to keep things very simple. I don't like to sensationalize images by getting angles from below, or really deep from above, or wide angle lenses. You'll see like all my pictures are typically very straight. And I just like to let the scenes dictate, to just document things like kind of in a very direct kind of way, and let the scene do the talking.
We're talking about photo essays or reportage. One name comes to mind, W. Eugene Smith with The Country Doctor, like kind of the prototype of how to construct a visual story with different types of photos, details, the wider shot. And do you think in terms of these, to have a mixture of different shots in your reportage, and when you're out on the field, is that something that you're going through, or is it all instinctual?
So honestly, that's a really good question. I think so I think a weakness of my photography is that I don't think, like, in terms of, when you look at like a film or a scene in a film, you've got like, you look at very often it's this way. You have like a tight shot, wide shot, scene setting shots. You have this kind of like formula to work, and I have honestly never been very good at that. I think the problem for me is, and so even now when I work on some like multimedia stories for the New York Times or whatever, I often am missing these like video shots that they really require to make these kind of things happen, because I'm not thinking like that. And I'm not thinking, if I regularly, I think if you look at I'm intrigued by this idea, but when you look at like a documentary, you'll see some really dull and boring shots, right, of someone's hands or someone's feet walking. And I would never think to take that. And that's probably still my kind of bias around this. Go back to this idea of the single picture, this it's not photographic, so it doesn't even occur to me to take the photograph. So I think that I need time to make my stories, because I'm waiting for these like scenes to happen, and I'm definitely learning to make more subtle images, images that fit into a story, and it's not all about these like, we call them in Australia bangers. I'm not sure that translates, but it's not. It can't all be like bangers. Like you got to have these like quieter in between images. I'm getting better at that, but I'm still not perfect at that. And I think for my stories, I often need just time to make the images in between. And I guess you could say a criticism of my work is I'm often shooting very wide and showing these scenes, and I'm not getting that range of different kind of views. And that would be like a fair criticism, but it's also just sort of not the way that I photograph. So
Well, I guess this impulsive way of taking photos, if I may call it like this, has certainly something very fresh and interesting about it. But probably it can work because you're Australian and you take a series in Australia because you just know a lot of things that are going on, the background. And I guess if you go to a different country, you have to be more prepared to know more about things and to be less... driven by also ideas that you have in your mind, but are not necessarily what is really going on in the place and the people. So maybe you have a different approach if you travel to other places.
So you're saying that, like, because you're not from that place, you might not have the same depth of experience of how things work, and I think that's true. But then at the same time, often you'll hear this, photographers that go to a country or go to a place that they're not used to, they're seeing things so in a fresh way. They're sort of they're seeing things that I might walk past every day where I live in Manly in Australia and think that's just completely ordinary. But for a visitor, they see something and it's like, wow, that's amazing. Look at that. And there's pictures in that. I think like as a street photographer or someone travel photographer, that they're kind of working to that energy of that. This is something I haven't seen before, and they would struggle to photograph their own backyard. I think that's a common thing for people. They really struggle to find what's interesting in their country. For many years, I was like working overseas, all kinds of incredibly interesting places. I've worked in Pakistan. I spent a year in South Sudan, covering civil war there. And this kind of place, you don't know much really about the full picture of what's happening, but you're making images that are like still incredible, visually stimulating and interesting, and and so I'm not sure this is answering your question so much, but I think working in Australia, sometimes it's like I feel sometimes that there's like it's a frustration because it is a hard place to work. People are not very responsive to being photographed, and there's for example, if you're in the countryside, there's not a lot of people around. It's a big place, and so you can drive for like a couple of hours and not see anybody. And so there is this like huge like feeling of like massive distances, and it's kind of hard to engage with people in the same way. If you go work in a very populated area in India, there's scenes happening on every corner. There's just a visual delight. But yeah, I think from going back to like photojournalism, if your intention is to show people what's going on and have be able to have a voice to say something that's because I want my pictures to mean something, then yeah, you need to understand what's going on and have an understanding of the story itself and the larger picture. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're known to do a lot of research for your work, and I think in another interview you talked about how important is it to get access to that photography, or just pressing the shutter button. In the end, it's just the smallest thing of all. You have to be in the position to take the picture. Can you talk a little bit about these topics?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is. There's a few things that you overlook when you're new to photography. People often say like, I'm off topic a little bit, but they say, "Oh, how do you get these colors?" And say, "Oh, I get these colors because like I'm there, like waiting for like the afternoon light, and I'm in the right position. And I've tried like 3 days to get this, and I didn't get it. But on this one day, it happened at the right light, and I got it. That's what it takes to get that image in the kind of color and interest." Remind me of your question again, please.
The amount of research that goes into your work and how to get access to.
Yeah. And so sometimes it really does feel like I know there's more to it. Like I've got that experience of having photographed for so many years that of course I shouldn't take that for granted. But it really feels like sometimes the job is literally just getting there to stand in that position in that moment. It's that simple, and the photography is simple. It's just like that's just you just you press the button. I mean, we have cameras now that are so sophisticated, that autofocus and whatever, all that stuff. I think taking a good photograph or a visually interesting photograph is become so easy in some ways. But the challenge that I'm always focusing on is the storytelling. That's the hard part, and getting access to whether it's like a military base or actually this really good example is the firework that we're looking at here. You have to be there to take the photograph, but it's like it's weeks of preparation. It's having the right car, the right equipment, the right training, the experience to know how to be safe in a fire, to be evading the police basically because they're trying to like stop you from getting to these areas. We'll coordinate with there's a photographer who was incredibly generous and it was sharing information, Nick Moyer, and he was reading. He's a sort of genius weather analyzer. And he was able to say, Matt, like, you got to be here. Get there. This is where the fire's coming. And so there's all these little pieces of the puzzle come together in that moment to make you the one that's there to take the photograph. Mm-hmm. And there's also luck as well, a huge part of it. So it's a really complicated mix of things that come together in that moment. Yeah.
It appears that the essential part of your work is to be able to come back to a place again and again, so you have more long-term projects and are really committed to them. So what is your idea about short-term projects?
In the sense of like my own way of working in short-term, or other photographers' work maybe?
Yeah, it can be an assignment which pays you for a short-term thing. Yeah. Or also something that you don't have the possibility to come back to because it's over or because it's just too difficult to get there. So how do you approach projects like this? What is your take on this?
Mm-hmm. So my personal projects, I have several that I've been working on and undergoing, and I've never really finished any one of them. And that's like a bit of an indictment of my personality. Like I'm a perfectionist. I have this feeling of it's not finished, it's not done, and I wish I had been able to finish more of these personal projects and sort of let them go, and say, this is not worth pursuing, like move on to something else. And so I wish I was more like that. I'm next week I'm going back to America to spend 5 weeks, on the road, documenting part of the Midwest. They're called the Rust Belt, and I was previously there 8 years earlier with my wife. We traveled around for 5 weeks as well, and made these portraits. And anyway, I'm really hoping that after this trip I can draw a line under it and then finish this project and say this is done. But to answer your question about the shorter projects, like. Definitely some photographers, some photojournalists feel unsatisfied with shorter projects, and they go, I'm just going from story to story, and it doesn't feel like I'm really saying that much or contributing that much. It doesn't feel like I'm being artistically challenged. I personally don't feel that at the moment. Like, I still get a thrill out of being involved in these stories, and I think I kind of like the pressure. I need the pressure actually of the time, and knowing I've got 5 days. I'm going to make something happen in 5 days. Like, I got to finish this story, and it's really helpful for my personality to have like the pressure, and then the editor going, we need to see these photos. You got a week to file them, and like these deadlines work for me. And I can I can quickly go, yep, that's done, and I move on to the next thing, and not get so obsessed with it, because I think there's like an obsession with long-term projects. You're just like scratching the surface, and you're like, oh my, but if I only spent another, 100 rolls of film and 3 months around, in this place, I can just get some more, and and that's like, you need that, but at the same time, it's like, ooh, when do you say enough's enough, but looking back, like, some of my favorite things I've done is just like, one of the reasons why I love this job for journalism is like, you get to you're thrown into these situations that you would never have any right to be involved with. You get a phone call. Not all my stories are my own pictures. I get calls to go, hey Matt, we need to send you to Solomon Islands and hang out with this person, that person, or whatever, or I did a story this year on dolphin hunting in the Solomon Islands, and that was, I didn't even know about it, and then I was sent there, and next minute I was like, hanging out with this village, and we went there for a week, and we ended up staying for 4 weeks, and I got really close to this village, and it was just an incredible life experience. Beyond the photograph itself was great opportunity, but the experience I think is what keeps drawing me back to the work and to this kind of storytelling.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is it that's making it so hard for you to finish personal projects or long-term projects? When you're working on assignment for a newspaper, much of the editing is maybe you propose some images, but then the final edit is done in the newsroom. And is that part of it, that on your working on personal projects, you have to do the editing, and it's much harder to get to a final version or idea of what the story is like?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think your expectations are so much higher with personal projects, and with an art project, with a conceptual project, it's, the images that you're chasing are so much more fleeting. If you get sent to do a specific story, you're there, it's happening, you're seeing it, and that's it. Like, you're simply, in a way, you are just recording what you see. But I think a visual art project, you're trying to, I don't know, you're wishing, you're hoping for something amazing to happen, something that's like, wow, what the fuck? Like, I've never seen that before. And you might get a little gem like that, like once a week or once a month or whatever. And these gems are like, the bangers, whatever, you're like, okay, you kind of collecting them. You're like, yeah, I got that. But if I go back out for another 4 months, I might get 4 more pictures, or whatever, a picture a month that is just, it's so much slower to work in that way, and you're so much more like, I think because it's your own project, you're just very hard on yourself, and I often feel like I've got nothing. I got no good. I've been on. I went out once on the road shooting a personal project for 4 months. Shot dozens or even over 100 rolls of film or whatever, and large format as well. And I didn't. I came home, felt like I got nothing, and that film sat there for months, over a year, I think. With that, I didn't even develop it. It just felt like I had nothing. And then eventually, I developed it, and eventually, I go back over it, and it's kind of grueling emotionally to like go back over your photos in that way, and you're seeing. But sure enough, there was like, oh, okay, there's something here, and it always feels like whenever I'm working, I never feel like I've got enough, or I've got, I'm never so satisfied. But I also deliberately don't try not to look at the back of my camera too much, because I never want to feel like, oh, like I got the shot, we can pack up now. I want to be like, I need that fire in my belly to be like, oh shit, I don't have it yet. I got to keep going. Because sometimes you just by just being like absolutely relentless and just keep going no matter what, the picture comes at the end of the day, and that's the picture, so you have to have that, I think, that obsession.
And at what point in a project do you ask for outside help to look at your picture, or do you do that at all?
Yeah, so my wife is incredible for that. I think she's naturally got a great eye for photography, but it also helps that she knows me and she knows what I'm trying to knows very well. So knows what I'm trying to get at with the pictures, and so so editing your images down to a smaller number to send to an editor is hard work. So it's easy to send an editor 100 photographs, right? You just go, oh, these pictures there's something in these pictures, there's 100 photos. But the problem with that is that if you send 100 photographs, depends on the editor, but the editor, could just botch it, Then they look at the pictures and they choose and you're like, oh my God, why did they choose that? Why did they choose this image? It's because you sent them the photo in the first place, why would you send it if you didn't want them to use it? And so it's actually, when I have the time, I really, really, really try to strip it back and send as little images as possible, to the editor. And in some way they appreciate that as well. They do, because that's the job. The job is not just to send them a unfiltered bunch of photographs. Having my wife there and be able to bounce ideas off her, and it's like she sees the pictures that shouldn't be there, and she's like, wait, why are these here? And she's brutal, absolutely brutal, but you need that, and also just to follow on from that, I love working with a photo editor that really gets it. I had the pleasure of working with some amazing photo editors over the years. One in particular that, it was almost like we were speaking a language together. I'd send him photographs, and I'd really think about what I was sending him. I really wanted to impress and be like, this is the picture, this is the story here, in this small pocket of photos. And then when he would show me his edit before it was published, and what I loved about him as well, he had the confidence to send me that and be like, hey, what do you think? It was a conversation. It wasn't this thing of I just handle the edit now. This is my job, and you're done now, Matt. No, it was a collaboration. And seeing the way that he would edit those pictures and the sequencing and the color and pairings with different colors, I learned so much about what you said before about how images work together, and that was such a really great relationship. And the best way to put it is I'd see his edit, and it was like he was speaking to me with my own photos, like a language to me. And I would be learning about editing and about the story and about my own photos in the way that he sequenced them. And sometimes I would look at, I would just instinctively put a photo in there as a bit of I'll just put this in, and he would grab that instinctual photograph that I wouldn't really think much about, put it in the essay, and be like, and then it would just be like, oh yeah, I get it now. I get what I was sort of thinking about it, but he made it happen. If that makes sense. So yeah, that was really cool to be part of and to learn from. Yeah.
And what role does your technical equipment play for your photography, if at all?
Yeah, no, I still definitely care about technology and try to stay like abreast of it and try to keep thinking about the way I tone my photos. You know, the way that you know, having a camera that keeps up, you know, and it's fast and yeah, I'm sort of like constantly, you know, at the moment I'm using like a mirrorless camera. It's very fast, but I really hate how they've removed the shutters. And it's just like this electronic shutter, and I have no feedback of when I take a photograph, and that's it's the worst feeling, because when you're shooting like documentary photographs where you can't make it happen again, you have one chance. There's not a feeling of like, oh, I've got the shot. When you had a DSLR, you feel the vibration. You go, yeah, I got the shot. You know, you have the confidence. You can keep going. You don't need to look at the back of your camera. Whereas this now with my mirrorless, I'm like, oh, there's no feeling of I've got this photograph. So it's like almost like I've lost that love of that moment. When I work on my personal projects now, I'm going to be using with a Mamiya 6. You know, when you press the photo, you hear the little click, and then you go, you wind on the film. Yeah. It's so satisfying, you know, and you know, each photograph is expensive because it comes at a cost. But I really love that, you know, and I think I would love to save up for like a Leica digital camera, you know, and just get back to that that a bit more of a manual experience, and of course, like, you know, I'll miss photographs for sure. That's part of it, but maybe there's something to be gained by missing some photos to be able to be more present and more part of the photographic, you know, moment with a camera like that. That's not quite as fast. Yeah.
So are you the kind of person who always carries his camera along, or would you just take your camera when you know you're out for your project and then maybe even use your cell phone or something, or is that ridiculous?
No. So I'm really the kind of photographer that because I think in stories now, I really only take my camera out when I'm on, you know, and it's funny because when you're working, you're looking the whole time, and you're like constantly like vigilant, and you're kind of like you know, you're on adrenaline. You're just looking for things, and you're scanning the whole time. But when I'm like, you know, with my family, relaxing, or without a camera, or, you know, wherever I am with no camera, I don't see photos. You know, you know what I mean? Like you don't see photographic opportunities. It's like your brain is like switched off in that moment, and you're just like, you're in a normal. It's just normal matte mode, you know, and so those, you know, very rarely you might see something that's like, oh, that's a photo. I mean, it's a very obvious situation, but I think like the photographers, like the you know, there's like street photographers that just see things in the street. That like, wow, how did you see that? Like that's just so you know, how on earth did you see it? That comes from just like walking at the same streets again and again and sharpening that, like, that part of you that sees those things in a scene. And the average person without a camera is never going to recognize that. You know, I think what's that quote about, like I'm sure there's a great quote. There is a great quote about just being, like, you know, essentially paraphrasing it. It's like, you know, good photography is not just like taking a photograph of an obvious thing. It's about seeing something like extraordinary in the ordinary, something that's just all around you. But then you I think it's not Stephen Shaw. To come back to that, but
and so street photography is not something that intrigues you, or that you say, okay, now I go out with my camera and do some street photography and well, take these pictures of the extraordinary and the ordinary.
I think like, you know, to a point, I like street photography. You know, I sort of mentioned I really got into Alex Webb's work, he's like the ultimate, well, one of the ultimate street photographers. So no, I absolutely love the photographers that can make these like complex, beautiful images, and it's it's storytelling. But it's very different to working on a story. Like working on a, it's almost like you're creating little worlds, and you're not. It's not necessarily like news related or this big issue. It's like, no, this little world that's your little scene, and you've captured that, and that's such a beautiful thing to do. And so, yeah, I love it. And, there's definitely crossover. Like, when I work on an assignment, sometimes, you're not just photographing like these obvious things that like about the story. You're actually, very often I try to, you're trying to create show people the atmosphere, a taste of what life is like. And say you're in Samoa or Tonga, you want to show like a street scene to, it might have nothing to do with the story, but it gives people a sense of place. And then when they're reading the story about, let's say it's about Chinese influence in the Tonga or something, people go, oh, this is what life is like over there. And so there's a really strong correlation between street photography and journalism. Yeah, I think. I enjoy doing that, and I think there's plenty of people that do it much better than I do. But yeah, it's something that is for sure something that I like to do. Yeah.
What are your influences? What other photographers do you what would you consider as your references or that you draw inspiration from?
Okay, that's a good question. It's changing all the time, and I think I draw influences from not just photography, but from from film, from painting. Because I started out with an interest in painting, so whenever I go to just an art gallery and you see this particularly Renaissance painting, the complex compositions of Renaissance. I mean, that's how I was like taught that classical way. With painting, and then it applies very much to photography. That Rembrandt lighting that we all work so well in photography is it's 100% applicable. So really inspired by art. I think I'm inspired by just like finding. It's to go back to storytelling. It's a bit boring, but yes, it's just I get inspired by stories and what's the best way to photograph this? Like how do I try to figure it out? What's a good approach? In terms of like photographers, let's think. Okay, there are photographers that have had a huge influence on the way that we work. Like Alec Soth is probably one. Not the biggest fan, but it's undeniable his influence he's had on portraiture and the way that we photograph, I'd say. And, then of course you've got the classics. You've got like Robert Frank of The Americans, that reportage. You've got, but at the moment, I've been looking into like Joel Sternfeld. I think his work is very curious for me. And this might be getting a little bit of a departure, but I'm beginning, okay, let me try to figure this out. So I'm beginning to take an interest in photography that is not necessarily beautiful, that is potentially hard to look at, but it is, because I think my background in photography has always been in this like, in beauty, and I guess I'm beginning to question a little bit why images need to be beautiful and sometimes often very nostalgic as well. There's a lot of I think in my work is a lot of nostalgia, and there's almost like a crux. You're relying on this feeling that people will see a photograph and they go, oh wow, like they're beautiful colors, they're beautiful light, of a very intense, maybe even depressing scene. But I've been speaking with I have a mentor actually in Holland, Corinne Nerbos. I'm not sure if you heard that name, and she's just an absolutely incredible thinker in photography, and she's really opened my eyes to the idea of working in a way that is. The best way to explain it would be like you might have like a survey of work and you might make a book, and it's a collection of images that make up a survey. Whether you're a street photographer or you're doing portraits, or that kind of thing. And that way of working is great, and you're making these beautiful images and interesting images. But the way that she explained it to me, this other way of thinking about how to use photography in a format of a book, is instead of making like a best of album, right? This is your best images throughout, and you put them all together. It's like you're trying to make if you're an author and you write a novel, it has to be coherent. You're making a novel that you read, that you follow through the whole. So it's trying to make a photo book that is so coherent that you can read it like a novel, and that is sort of my interest now, and something I'm exploring, and potentially I have an idea and it's that I want to pursue, and it's really it's about, that's really sort of, in a way, it's kind of hardcore storytelling. The beauty, there's nothing else, there's no other distractions. It's about trying to so I'm kind of interested in that concept, and something that's what that I want to explore.
So what is the importance for you, the way you show your pictures? Would you prefer your pictures in a book, like a coherent work, or are you satisfied with an exhibition like this where you have your pictures displayed in a huge size for several months? Or there are so many ways of showing your pictures that are really important to you, not those that are on an assignment. What would be your favorite way of seeing your pictures?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on what it is you've been photographing, or what you're trying to say with your work as well. So this work, actually, we were chatting before. I've made a book of the Black Summer bushfires, and the book was not a artistic photo book. It was a book for the masses. For the massive print run. It was for the public to see, and because I don't see this work as anything but journalism. Photojournalism, it's showing people, telling a story about this terrible time, and so the format right now of being out in the open and in public, have these large images is perfect. It's perfect for these images, I think. If I was making, for my next book, next project in America, in the Rust Belt, probably not as important to have those images outside. Maybe it'd be great as well, but less so. I feel like this is about sort of showing the world what happened, and this is like, it really suits this style of this kind of story, I guess. So thinking about what it is you're trying to say with your work, and choosing the best sort of format for that. So for the Rust Belt project, I'm really excited to publish it, and that would be a very different book. It would be more of an artist book. It would be my priority would be on the quality of the printing. It would be not much text. It would be letting the photographs do the talking, because it's not necessarily about trying to inform or educate a population about it's about actually creating a sense of intrigue and wonder and whatever it is that you're trying to do with that kind of more of a conceptual way of working.
How deliberate do you go about mapping out your career as a photojournalist or as a photographer? Is that something like a master plan in your mind that you maybe think in steps or in phases of your career?
It's funny, I was just thinking about that only before we spoke, because I was thinking about it and thinking, well, looking around here, you see these amazing photographers, and they have a very consistent way of working, and they are chipping away, and they're doing projects, and it always seems to be consistent. But for me, my problem, I think, is that I'm so kind of fascinated by and love with photography in a way, and storytelling, and that I feel compelled, for better or for worse, probably for worse, to then mix it up and go, I'm going to go and do this art project that's really conceptual. It's got nothing to do with journalism, because everyone knows me for journalism, and people follow me and they're expecting me to do this, but I'm going to go and do some art project that probably is not going to land quite well with the people that like me for my photojournalism. So I'm not really sure that's a very wise thing to do, but I also, it's very hard to. I've always just followed my my curiosity, and it's probably not a smart decision, but I really just want to make this art project in the US, and I want to do this other art project after that as well. So yeah, there's probably practically I probably should continue, investing my time and energy into photojournalism, but I can't deny this other interest I have, and to make other kind of images and other kinds of work.
Yeah, you won all these awards like World Press Photo Award, Pictures of the Year, and all these. So the question comes to my mind, is this something that you were dreaming of since you were a kid, or is it something so that you planned maybe the steps to get to this point, or is it something that just happened?
So I don't know. When I first started getting into, storytelling and documentary photography, it was actually by traveling and by taking images on. It's like almost like street photography, really. I was traveling around South America, making images, and then I went to Danish School of Journalism, and then I spent 2 years and then a lot longer onwards working in a very remote part of Australia called Arnhem Land, and really, I had 10 years where I was really dedicating myself to documentary photography and not making any progress, not having any success. I was kind of like working with film, where everyone else that was getting work was already shooting digital cameras, and I was out bush in the middle of nowhere in Australia making work that very few people have seen, and so I felt like I was making good images, and I felt like I was getting really good at photography, but at the same time, I was so detached from the rest of reality. I wasn't engaging with photo festivals or photo editors or newspapers. All my colleagues had gone through cadetships, or they'd been out there working for publications. And so, to be really honest with you, I did 10 years of this, and I wasn't making the right decisions, and I more or less kind of gave up on photojournalism and documentary photography. I was like, there's no future for me here. There's no, nothing's happening. I really tried, and then I think what it was, and I'd been working on all these projects. I've got so many of these projects. I've these personal art projects, all shot in film, that I have dozens of boxes of, hundreds of rolls of film, and someday I'll do something with them. But I wasn't getting them out. I wasn't finishing projects. But what really changed for me was, meeting my wife, and who's a journalist, and sort of just sharpening those skills and thinking about it in that way of story first. It's all about the story. It doesn't matter how good your photographs are. If there's no story behind them, it means nothing. And so, to answer your question, I basically I never thought I'd be getting acknowledgement or getting sent to a photo festival on the other side of the world, or because I've always I struggled for a very, very long time, and then even when these this was a really kind of career defining moment for me when the Black Summer bushfires happened. You could never imagine a massive world news story like this coming to Australia. It just was not even part of my imagination. So, while I was photographing this, you might be interested to know that, I was already at that point working for the New York Times, but but when this happened, this is an Australian story, and I spent 2 months probably nearly working most of the time, working heavily on documenting these fires. And there was a little bit of interest internationally, but not much. And it was very frustrating. And I remember it was kind of a moment, I was like, really I was going, this career is so unsustainable and so so frustrating, because I was seeing these incredible and documenting these incredible moments and what I thought was important, but there was not this global or international interest. It was just still very much an Australian story. But the day that changed was when I took this photograph of this kangaroo. Not that image changed the course of the reporting, but it just so happened that there's also thousands of people cut off, by the fires on that day, and it just kind of exploded as an international story. And I would it literally went from like nearly no interest to insane interest. Like we had, my phone was just like, people calling me, journalists, dozens of journalists like reaching out to me. Oh, we're coming to Australia. We're coming from France. We're coming from whatever. Can we catch up with you? Can we follow you into the fires? I had a documentary crew wanting to do a film on me. It just changed, and it was impossible to imagine that before that happened. And I was like so thrilled that this work was like acknowledged at World Press, and I was for the first time sent overseas to exhibit photos, and but it's definitely not something that you could imagine happening, and especially a story of such significance taking place just not down the road, but close to where I live. You think of these bigger stories happening elsewhere, I guess. Yeah.
Take us into the moment that you took this photo of the kangaroo that won your World Press Photo Award. Do you still remember the circumstances? And did you feel after taking the shot that this could possibly be a defining shot of your career or a pivotal moment?
Yeah. Okay. So I just mentioned that I'd been photographing these fires for 2 months, and it was just an overwhelming amount of like devastation that we'd been recording. And so you kind of get a little bit, it was incredible, but you also get a little bit, not jaded, but you just get so used to seeing this thing. And so this day I was out there, photographing in Conjola, and it was just sort of around the corner from where I was actually on holidays with my family. And, so it was very close to where I was sort of holidaying. And, I'd already been photographing for months, and I told my wife, I said, I got to go. This is going to be a big day. I could see the weather forecast. And she was like, oh, do you really have to go? That was that kind of vibe, And so I was slow in leaving. I was meant to be, my mate Nick Moyer, who I mentioned before, he's like, get to Cobargo, which actually was a major catastrophe, probably one of the worst of that time. So, but I never made it. Because I was too late. That fire in Cobargo was burning at 3 a.m. in the morning. It was burning like the kind of fire activity you would only ever see normally in the middle of the day, with the extreme heat. But this situation was so extreme and so unprecedented, really. So anyway, I was heading to Cobargo, and then I was, driving down late, and then I saw this smoke plume happening. And one of the advice of Nick to me was always, if you see something, stay there. Like, don't try to go somewhere else. You just because you don't know. You could, if you keep going down south, you might be cut off at a police roadblock and not get access. So anyway, I was driving in. I saw this big smoke plume. And just as I saw it, the police were setting up this roadblock, and I just managed to squeeze past before they shut things down. And I got in, and sure enough, this fire was it was early in the morning, but there's a massive. They produce these kind of like storm, like pyrocumulus. It's terrifying seeing this thing come towards you. And anyway, sort of this is like a bit of a long version of the story, but. This day was. I got a phone call from my editor while I was in the middle of the fire. From the New York Times saying, "Hey Mac, can you work for us?" I was like, "Yeah, of course, yeah. I'm in the fire. Like, don't worry, I'm getting." And I'd already seen. I've been photographing for hours and been making really strong images, And so I was photographing for so long, and then this image happened. I think it was about 1 p.m. So it looks like nighttime, but really it's middle of the day. And I was photographing this house burning, and it's just like another house burning, like the hundreds I've seen before. But I guess, of course, what was different about this was I saw this kangaroo, kind of frightened, trying to figure out how to get away from this, from the scene, and then all of a sudden it kind of just darted right in front of me, and I'd already my camera was already sort of set to photograph that house, and it just was a matter of just being able to take the photo in that moment and frame it in that composition in that way. And truthfully, I took the photo. I thought, oh, okay, cool, but I never allow myself to think I've got the photo. As I said before, I never want to be like, congratulate myself and pat myself on the back and think, oh, time to go, you got the photo. I deliberately shut my thinking down and think, what's next? What's the next photograph? Where do I need to be now? And so, I would have acknowledged it was a good photo, but I was thinking, where do I need to be next? And so after that moment, I raced down to the beach, and that's when I was photographing these like thousands of people. You can see these people, and because showing the human impact is so hard to do in an emergency situation like that, because you're not able to move around a lot, and your access is very, very difficult because you're confined to this one area. So I was down to the beach to photograph these poor people that were cut off and had potentially losing homes and stranded and struggling to breathe, and because the smoke was there and they weren't prepared with masks. And then after that, I was back up to the next image. Oh, hang on. One of the next images, another house was burning, and so it was just on and on and on. And then after that, I went to this valley and I saw there's 180 homes were destroyed. And it was just a surreal scene, being completely alone, just me, cruising through this apocalyptic scene, seeing this devastation, and you're all alone, and you're thinking yourself, well, your brain power is like, how to be safe. Like, where's the power lines? Where's the trees that could fall on me? Where's the dangers? You're constantly thinking danger, danger, danger. And so I made this image. For some, I don't know why they didn't use it for this exhibition, but of this melted. I don't know if you've seen that photograph. It's probably my favorite photo in some ways. This car which completely melted, and it's like almost like blood coming from the car. And it's so. You're making these images, and again, you're not overthinking it. And I have trouble remembering because you're just so overwhelmed with what's happening. You're just trying to focus on what's next and keeping safe. So to answer your question, so this is actually I personally find this quite interesting because I like thinking back on it, because I was making all these images. And then I went to another town after it, and I was just like, I'm just like relentless, keep working. And I'm not really like a press photographer where like I'm file images straight away. A press photographer would have stopped, filed images, kept working. But I'm thinking like, just record this moment. Don't waste any time on the computer. Like this is so important. So, I'm in my forward drive. I'm like, people were stranded, but I basically found a way out. Driving, zigzagging around these trees that had fallen over, and I found another community that was hit by the fire. I find this grave site that's just on fire, which is a surreal apocalyptic scene. And then, so I'm working till late in the evening, just to make the most of this, to be able to be there. I recognize it was important. And then, so this is New Year's Day. Sorry, this is New Year's Eve. And so Sydney is famous for Australia's famous for these big parties we have. And so I'm photographing this, and it's about 10 p.m. at night. I'm just absolutely like covered in black, soot, and my eyes are like red from the smoke, and I'm absolutely exhausted. So I'm driving back to this town where my family is, because we're on holidays. And then I get there, so like wander in, and but meanwhile, like everyone else was stranded because they couldn't get out. But because I had this car, I could. I was the only one really that was able to move around. And I walk in, and they're just like playing some board game or something, waiting for the fireworks, at Sydney Harbour, and it was such head fuck, because you just spend the whole day at this in this absolute catastrophe, and and then their family is just carrying on with their day. And I sort of sat there, and I was like a little bit shell shocked and tired, and I didn't look at my images. I think I had already sent a batch to my photo editor in New York, and I went to bed. Anyway, so woke up the next morning, and it's a big news. That's when it really became a massive international news story. And, my editor was like buzzing, and I could tell that he was like, hey, Matt, where are those other images? I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll get them to you. So I opened my laptop and I'm looking at the images. And then my wife is like, I mentioned before, we're on holidays and there's an expectation the whole time of like not working. And so we went to the beach and I was like, went for a swim. And my editor was like, oh, Matt, you got anything special that's coming? Like, he's kind of like prodding me, like what, what's coming? I was like, oh, well, this is like, I got this one photo, and I took a photo of my laptop in that morning, so it's on my phone. So I was just, there's one photo of this kangaroo that I reckon could be quite good. Like, do you want to see it? And I was just like, WhatsApped him, and it's like, yeah, can you how quickly can you get me the image? I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm at the beach, with the family. Like, he's like, oh, can you like get it for me? Basically, he told me if you can get it to me in the next 20 minutes, I can get it on the front page. And of course, that is a strong motivation for any photographer to be hurry. So I raced back with the family. I was like, sorry guys, I got to get back to the computer, and I got that image off to him, and he got it onto the front page. And the next day it ran on the front page, and then the day after that, it was like on dozens of world pages around the world. That was like totally surreal, to see that image and the way that it sort of got picked up and seen and shared by like Greta Thunberg and Leonardo DiCaprio and those kinds of people. And it was awesome. It was so much fun, to see that and to know that like, my work was having an impact, and that finally like this story that I cared so much about was getting the attention it deserved. Yeah.
Well, what a story behind the picture. It's fascinating to hear all that context that you gave. Always a hard question is what makes a good photo. Maybe we can stay with that photo. Why do you think did that photo have that impact and that reaction?
Yeah, so something that I didn't really consider at the time, but it's become very apparent to me now, is that the reason why this was such a big story, I think, and such a monumental situation, was the impact on the wildlife. 3 billion animals, I think the last count was, that were killed by these fires. And I think when you're in the country it's happening, everyone's actually focusing on the human impact. Mm-hmm. They're thinking, 34 people died in these fires. Hundreds or thousands of homes were lost. So it's very, you're thinking about that, and of course, that a lot of animals are being killed. But I actually since have spoken to an academic that was studying the coverage of the fires, and he shared some data with me, and he said, actually, so overwhelmingly, the world was interested in the animal impact. That was what they were focused on. And so he said something like, which made sense to me now. He said, well, your image, it spoke to this. It spoke to both the human impact, because you can see the house burning, but it spoke to this iconic animal that was in harm's way of this fire, and it spoke for the of course the just sort of unimaginable loss of life from other species that were killed. So in that context, it kind of makes sense. But I think something that we talk about a lot with other photographers is that it's a very simple image.
Yes.
It really is. It's not like like I have photographer friends who go, oh, that bloody kangaroo photo again, and it's like it's a very simple image. It's not the most complicated, complex, or image I've ever taken, for sure. But
you're in Australia for sure.
We have
other fires on the planet, but there, this is Australia. This is exactly what is going on now.
Yes, I think I really do believe actually that it's the simple images that convey a story immediately that have the potential to be so impactful and these days you say viral, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the images of that the young boy that drowned on the beach, very simple image. Now think of another image taken that went viral, that went around the world of a young kid crying at the border in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Very simple image. I think that as photographers, we love these complex, the Alex Webb, we love these complex images, the composition, the complexity. That's what we love. Mm-hmm. But what really has the chance to have the most impact is these images that hit you straight and quick. There's actually just today, Hans Burkhardt. Am I pronouncing his name?
Yeah. Hans-Jürgen Burkhardt.
Yeah. He said, I wrote it down. I thought it was a really interesting quote. He said, I want to take images that my mother understands. My mother gets. And it's really admirable, because you're not out there trying to show these complex, arty images that only photographers are going to really understand. But he's wanting to make images for the public to consume and to appreciate and to see. And I think that's a really admirable, approach to photography. And so, going back to that image, it was a very simple image that immediately said, this is a fire in Australia and this is the impact. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Do you think that sometimes what gets in the way of really communicating the things you want to communicate to a wider public if you think too much like a photographer?
Yeah, I think for sure style can get in the way. I think I mentioned before, I don't like to exaggerate things, use like wide angle lenses or there's different elements. I like to really let the scene do the talking, simple is strong. And so there it's all about the access and being the one in front and being there in that moment. And that's a lot about people skills, convincing someone, I've got to be there, let me in, that kind of thing. So that's why I sort of revert back to this, I guess, feeling that like what I do is actually quite simple. It's actually simple photography. And it's about the scene and everything else. It's just the you look at like Trent Park's work, for example. I mean, that's the polar opposite. That's very complex photography, incredible. Like he is a master of the medium of film. He pushes negatives and he does the most incredible complex things. He will like hit up his developer. Use it at full, like no dilution and crazy hot just to get a particular look, that I love that. But that photo nerds love his work, you ask the average person off the street, like, hey, like, do you like Trent Park's work? They're not gonna be able to really know his work, so it's a very different audience, I think, that he's speaking to versus what we as photojournalists do.
Mm-hmm. What kind of future do you see for photojournalism?
Great question. Something that we talk about all the time. Getting to these photo festivals, a big theme, not to be a downer, is just everybody telling everybody, all these photographers coming together, and the overwhelming experience amongst fellow photojournalists is that things are really bleak at the moment, really, really tough, and so in some ways it's a bit of a downer, got to be honest. I look at like what I do in Australia and I have the opinion that like even though I've, won awards and things, I still don't really feel like I'm able to have a sustainable career just making photojournalism, and it saddens me, but that's just the reality. It's really tough, and so in my line of work, like to survive financially, I've got to diversify is a fancy word, but I got to come up with other ways of working. And we were talking before, like one of the things I love to do is teach, and I really enjoy leading workshops on storytelling. And then last year I did more of a practical workshop where we traveled to Antarctica with a group of sort of like-minded photographers, and that was exhausting, but it was also a great experience, and so I think this is one part of how I'm sort of like diversifying what I do, I guess, and that kind of work, it helps pay for the personal projects, and like I do a bit of commercial work. I even do like headshots sometimes, like I'm not gonna like be all snooty and turn up work. Work's work. Like if someone asked me to shoot a wedding or something, yeah, sure, why not? I'm not precious. You got to survive. You got to put food on the table, and it's all just a means to be able to. Yeah, I think as long as that work doesn't distract or dominate so much that I can't do my passion, you know, what I feel like I'm meant to be doing, it's fine. Mm-hmm. But I would never let it take over completely and become like a corporate sellout, you know, like that kind of thing. Yeah, it's important that I keep it at a distance. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's touch on the workshop topic. What advice would you give to aspiring photojournalists? What is the main thing that they should focus on?
Oh, big question. Okay, advice. I think biggest mistakes people make is that they love photography, but they're not really thinking about how their photography is going to be used by other people, you know, and how that fits into the you know, not just photojournalism, of course. So if you want to be a photojournalist, you need to understand what that publication is interested in and the kind of stories that they want, and you need to come to them with that story. You know, you need to be if you were to you know, if you're like calling the editor and hey, like I've got a story and you know it fits in with their publication and you can do it at a reasonable, you know, not too expensive, you've got a great chance of just getting a, you know, opportunity, you know. So, you know, I would say just like, yeah, you need to, I would really always, my recommendation is to do everything but become an expert photographer, you know, become an expert in politics, read, understand what's going on around you, make networks and connections with editors. You know, they're not going to come to you. You need to come to them. You know, you need to be assertive, and you got to make your own opportunities. Yeah, that's challenging. Like, you know, it's not easy to network and do all those things, but it's part of it. You know, and so yeah, like you're probably already a pretty good photographer. You know, like. Of course, you can always get better, but you need to do the things that might not seem sexy to do, but are so important to make to have a, you know, have a career in photojournalism. So I would never really recommend anybody to study photography. I really wouldn't. I think it's so much more important to, you know, if you're able to study. Even just journalism would be helpful, or if you studied like international politics or something, that would be fantastic. So yeah, you know, to be working for the you know, for high-end publications, you have to know that you have to have lived in the world as well. Yeah. And that would be the next point, probably like life experience. You know, because if you're rocking up. You know, I what I love about this job is you spend time with some of the most like, you know, disadvantaged people in very vulnerable situations, and then the next week you might get sent to hang out with some of the most wealthiest, most powerful people in the world. You know, it's just the contrast is so extreme, and you need to be able to speak to both those people, and with you know, and with confidence and be able to say, you know, this is why this is the story we're doing, and this is why, and you need to understand the larger picture here, you know, to be able to hold your own in that kind of environment. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I think, well, at the end, some great advice for aspiring photographers and great insight of your thinking as a photographer was fascinating. Real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking the time.
No worries. It's been great. I've really enjoyed this. So yeah, all the best.
Thank you so much.
No worries, Pia. Yeah, thanks, Kai.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bevor es mit der folgenden Podcast-Episode losgeht, noch ein ganz kurzer Hinweis in eigener Sache. Du fotografierst gerne Street, aber deine Bilder erzählen keine Geschichte. In meinem Online-Kompaktkurs Street Photography geht es genau darum. Weg vom schönen Einzelbild, das von der Ästhetik lebt, hin zu Bildern mit Bedeutung und erzählerischer Tiefe. Der Kurs besteht aus 4 interaktiven Live-Seminaren mit Raum für deine Fragen, für Austausch und Diskussion. Plus einer abschließenden Bildbesprechung mit ausführlichem Feedback zu deinen eigenen Bildern. Los geht es am 4. Februar 2026. Alle Infos findest du unter www.abenteuer-fotografie.de/street-photography-kompaktkurs. Den klickbaren Link findest du natürlich auch nochmal wie immer in den Shownotes in deiner Podcast-App. Ja, und wenn du Fragen dazu hast, dann kannst du mir auch direkt eine E-Mail schreiben an Kai Beermann, alles klein und zusammen, Beermann mit BEH, @web.de. So, und jetzt geht es los mit der Podcast-Episode. Viel Spaß!